Hello, sweeties. Today I thought Barlam might like to come and listen. This is Barlam, and I've had Barlam since I was about 3. So he's probably more than 60 years old. He used to be all this colour, but he fell to pieces. So my mummy stitched all this brown. Can you see all of her stitches? She stitched it all over him so that he would last. And he has lasted. I've still got him. So this is Barlam, and Barlam is going to listen to chapter 8. Okay? Can you see it there? And do you remember? I think I showed you it was Midsummer's Night, and it looks probably like Stig and Barney, I would think, and a horse. But we'll have to find out. Okay? Are you ready? Oh, get myself comfy. Right, here we go. Barney lay awake on his bed. It was hot. He hung his feet over the edge of the bed to cool them down. Somewhere in the room, a summer mosquito was whining about, and from inside came the drone. No, I'm sorry. From outside came the drone of a farm tractor working late and the barking of dogs from the village. Through the curtains, I'm really not reading this very well, am I? I'm going to try again. Though the curtains were drawn, he knew it was still daytime outside. It would be daytime for hours yet, but he had to go to bed in the daylight just because he was only 8. Still, he wouldn't go to sleep. He couldn't. It was so hot and stuffy. He had asked his grandmother why he couldn't stay up until it was dark, and she had explained that today was the longest day and tonight was the shortest night, and that it wouldn't get dark until after 10 o'clock. Far too late for a boy of 8 to stay up. So it must have been June. 21st of June, I think, is the longest day. All right, he thought. If it was the shortest night, he wouldn't go to sleep at all. He would see what it was like not to sleep. Barney thought of Stig. I bet he doesn't go to sleep when it's daylight, he thought. And he's how old? How old was Stig? About 8? 80? 800? 8,000? Thinking of figures made Barney feel drowsy, and before he knew it, he had gone off to sleep. It was grandmother going to bed that woke him up again. She only opened the bedroom door a little to see if he was all right, but suddenly he was wide awake. Bother! He'd been asleep after all, but he wouldn't do it again. He'd stay awake now. He got out of bed and looked out of the window. At first he thought it was still daytime, but no, the light came from a big white moon in the south. And in the north there was still a bluish light, as if the sun had not gone far out of sight behind the elm trees. He wouldn't go back to bed. He'd go out in the moonlight. He'd go and see Stig in the night time. His heart was thumping as he thought of the idea. It was still very warm, so he slipped on a pair of shorts and nothing else, and crept carefully out of the bedroom and down the creaking stairs. Oh, he's been a bit naughty, isn't he? He pulled at the stiff bolts of the front door, trying to make no noise, but Dinah the spaniel, who slept downstairs, must have heard him, for she gave a questioning bark. Whoop! Is that a questioning bark? Be quiet, Dinah, whispered Barney crossly. It's only me. If you don't shut up, you'll spoil everything. At last he managed to undo the stiff bolts and the lock, and the door swung open. He went out into the shadow of the house, and then into the moonlight. Everything was very still. Suddenly he jumped as he heard his name called. Barney! It was Lou, looking down from her bedroom window. Barney, what are you doing? Lou hissed. Just going out, nothing to do with you, answered Barney quietly. But it's the middle of the night. I know, I don't care. It's light as day. I can see. Golly, so it is, said Lou. But where are you going, Barney? I'm not going to tell you. Oh, please, Barney. Don't go yet. Can I come too? Lou begged. Barney looked at the dark shadows under the fruit trees and thought of how shadowy the pit would be. Perhaps it would be better if there were 2 of them. All right, you can be my bodyguard. Hurry up then. Oh, thank you, Barney. Lou's head disappeared from the window, and soon Barney heard the click of her door and the creak of the stairs. When she appeared at the front of the house, she had Dinah with her. I thought I'd bring Dinah too, she said, as an extra bodyguard. Where are we going, Barney? I'm going to see Stig. Lou gasps. Really and truly, Barney? Of course. You can come with me to the pit, but I'll have to ask him if he wants to see you. All right, Barney, said Lou, with wide-open eyes. They set off together through the moonlit garden. The red roses look black in the moonlight, said Lou. Do they? Said Barney. I can see as well as in the moonlight as in the daytime. Come on. They went through the gate into the paddock. Flash the old pony was awake and cropping the dewy grass. He tossed his head and snorted in surprise when he saw them, then went back to his feeding. They crossed the paddock, Dinah running in rings around rabbit trails, and came to the edge of the copse. In spite of the strong moonlight and the faint glow in the north, it looked very dark under the trees. They stood still. Shh, said Barney. What is it? Whispered Lou. Isn't it quiet? Whispered Barney. It was so quiet that they could hear the chiming of a church clock from a long way away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Midnight, breathed Lou. They walked to the edge of the dark wood together, then they stopped. How different the moonlight made everything look. They seemed to be standing on the edge of a deep forest, pierced by shadowy glades instead of the straggling copse they knew. Even Dinah, who usually took any excuse to go plunging into the thickets after rabbits, seemed to hesitate. Then she sniffed. The hair on the back of her neck rose up, and she barked. Barney felt the hair on his neck rising up too. He jumped as the pony came prancing up and snorted behind them, and stood looking with pricked ears in the same direction as Dinah. Dinah barked again. Then before their eyes a great animal leapt into a patch of moonlight in the glade and stood there for a moment. Look at the great animal. Look. What's that? It's got antlers. It's a stag, breathed Lou in astonishment. I know, whispered Barney. But there aren't any stags here, exclaimed Lou. Dinah was the first to recover from her surprise, and she hurled herself into the glade, and the stag bounded off into the wood with Dinah in pursuit. The pony snorted and blew behind them and stood there with quivering nostrils. It was then that the children went midsummer crazy. Without a word, Lou grabbed the pony by the mane. Barney legged her up on the pony's back. Lou hoisted him up in front, and before they could stop to think, they had cleared the fence and were galloping straight for the edge of the pit. The pit was there all right, the pony poised on the edge. Then, with a spring and a scramble, which kept them too busy clinging with legs and hands to think what was happening, Flash was down and up the other side. What had happened? Instead of the great quarry, there was a mere scratch in the ground, and now nothing was familiar. They expected every minute to come to the cornfield beyond the copse, but the thickets and glades stretched on and on. They were reaching the slope, which should have led to the lane, and Flash slowed down a little. But from far ahead came Dinah's mad yelping and the crashing of undergrowth, and the pony needed no urging to pursue the hunt. And still no landmarks came in sight, no open fields, no hedges, no orchards, no farms, only hazel thickets, beech woods and the chalky hillside. Without a rein to guide or restrain him, the pony went like the wind, his head well up, and Barney and Lou could only cling there with their bare legs and look with round eyes at the strange landscape. "Barney!" gasped Lou, clinging to her brother more tightly than she had ever done before. "We're dreaming all this, really?" "You may be. I'm not," Barney shouted against the wind and twined his fingers more deeply in the pony's mane. He was hanging onto the pony's mane so he didn't fall off. They were galloping up a little valley between clumps of bramble and taller bushes. Galloping and galloping. There was no sound of barking from Dinah. Suddenly, there in the moonlight was the dog, lying stretched out on the turf right in front